12 nannies. 12 resignations. 2 Korean babies who screamed through every night, threw food at every wall, and broke every trained professional sent to calm them. Their father, the most feared Mafia boss in Seoul, couldn't fix it. Nobody could. Then a poor maid brought her 2-year-old daughter to work. The little girl sat between the twins, babbled pure nonsense. And both boys burst out laughing for the very first time. Nobody saw that coming. Especially him. Hey family, welcome to my story channel. Please subscribe and give this video a like. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones. Thank you so much for the support. Now sit back, and let's move into today's story. The bowl of porridge hit the wall at exactly 6:43 a.m. It didn't just fall. It launched hurled by a 14-month-old with surprising arm strength and zero remorse. It splattered across the cream wallpaper in a wide, ugly arc, dripping slowly down toward the baseboard while the rest of the mansion held its breath. Then Jae-yoon opened his mouth and screamed. Not a cry. A scream the full body, red-faced, vein in the forehead kind that sounded like a fire alarm had learned to have feelings. His twin brother Jaemin heard it, looked at the wall, looked at the nanny, and immediately joined in at full volume. The nanny Ms. Park, hired 6 days ago, references excellent, nerves formally intact, took one slow step backward. Then another. Her back hit the nursery doorframe. Ms. Park. Mr. O, the head butler, appeared in the corridor behind her, clipboard in hand. Miss Park, the morning feeding isn't. She turned around. Her left eye was twitching. There was pureed sweet potato in her hair from yesterday that she had simply stopped trying to remove. She reached into her uniform pocket, pulled out a folded resignation letter already written, already signed, as if she'd known, and pressed it against Mr. O's chest. I cannot, she said. Her voice was completely flat. I physically cannot. She walked down the hallway at a pace that was not quite running but was very close to it. A junior maid pressed herself against the wall to let her pass. The front door opened. The front door closed. Mr. O looked down at the letter. 12, he thought. 12 nannies. He added it to the board. Inside the nursery, both boys were still going. Jaemin had pulled his blanket through the crib rails and was attempting to eat it, crying the whole time. Jae-yoon had thrown his pacifier across the room, watched it land, screamed louder as if personally offended by gravity, then threw his water cup in solidarity. 2 junior maids stood in the doorway doing the thing all the staff had learned to do, present but not close, available but not provoking. Nobody touched the twins without armoring themselves emotionally first. Nobody made sudden movements. Nobody spoke above a whisper within 30 feet of the nursery. The kitchen maid had stopped using the blender during nap time 6 weeks ago. The gardener had begun scheduling the lawnmower for whenever the boys were already crying, a noise-under-noise strategy that Mr. O had quietly approved. Everyone in this mansion had reorganized their entire existence around 2 14-month-old boys who ruled the house like small, chaotic kings. 3 floors up, behind a closed office door, John Siwon sat in absolute silence. He could still hear them. The walls of this mansion were thick stone, then plaster, then expensive paneling, and he could still hear his sons crying through all of it. The sound had lived inside this house for so long it had become part of the structure, like the pipes or the ventilation. He was 34 years old. He ran an empire that made grown men sweat through tailored suits just walking into the same room as him. He had never once in his adult life stood in front of a problem he couldn't solve or a person he couldn't move. And yet, every morning for 18 months he had stood at that window overlooking the nursery wing and watched, through the glass, while his sons fell apart and done nothing. Not because he didn't care. Because he didn't know how. Yuna would have known how. He pushed that thought back down to wherever he kept the ones that couldn't be used. Min-jun, his assistant, knocked twice and entered. He looked at Siwon's face and kept his voice very neutral. Miss Park resigned this morning, sir. I know. That's the 12th. I know, Min-jun. Silence. The child psychologist called again. He says the boys are experiencing prolonged emotional. Replace the nanny by tonight. Siwon's voice was final. And send the psychologist a check. We're done with him. Min-jun wrote it down and left without another word. Siwon turned back to the window. Down in the nursery wing, he could still hear them. He pressed one hand flat against the glass. His sons were in there, His blood, his responsibility, the last thing Yuna ever gave him, and the glass between them might as well have been a wall a mile thick for all he knew how to cross it. He stood there until the screaming finally cried itself into exhausted silence. Then he went back to his desk and waited for the 13th nanny to fail. The next morning, Nadia Osei, 27 years old, arriving the next morning, with 2 worn suitcases, a letter of recommendation from a hotel she cleaned for 3 years, and the kind of quiet dignity that doesn't ask for a room to notice it. She is the new housekeeper. She has no idea what she is walking into. Nadia stood at the iron gates at 7 a.m., looking up at the mansion with calm, careful eyes. The guard scanned her ID twice. "You know 12 people have quit this job," he muttered. "I'm not them," she said simply. The gate opened. Inside, Minjun looked her up and down. "Can you handle chaos?" Nadia almost smiled. She was a single mother with a 2-year-old, 3 months behind on rent, and a broken washing machine. She was chaos. "Yes," she said. "I can handle it." She had absolutely no idea. The mansion had a system. Every surface had a rule. Every person had a place. Nadia learned fast. She was not to enter the East Wing without permission. She was not to speak to Mr. John unless spoken to. She was not to go near the nursery. That last rule was delivered by the head butler, Mr. O, with a tone that suggested the nursery was less a baby's room and more an active war zone. He wasn't wrong. By day 3, Nadia had heard the twins cry for so long she started hearing it even when the mansion was quiet. The sound lived in the walls. She mopped floors. She polished silver. She kept her head down and worked like her rent depended on it, because it did. On day 4, she passed a storage room and found 11 resignation letters pinned to a board. Someone had framed them like trophies. Or warnings. "The one on the far left lasted 6 hours," said a voice behind her. She turned. Minjun stood there, holding a tablet, looking mildly amused. "6 hours?" Nadia asked. Jae-yoon threw a spoon. "Hit her right here." He pointed to his forehead. "She was gone before lunch." Nadia looked back at the letters. "And the most recent one?" "Left at 2 a.m. Said she couldn't take the screaming anymore." He paused. "None of us can. But we don't have a choice." Nadia said nothing. She went back to work. That evening, she passed the nursery hallway and slowed. The crying was different tonight. Not rage, exhaustion. The kind of crying that had given up expecting anyone to come. She stopped outside the door. Pressed her hand flat against it. "Don't," she told herself. "It's not your job." She walked away. But she came back at midnight with warm water and a cloth, just in case someone had missed cleaning up after the night feeding. The night nurse, new and already trembling, looked at her with desperate gratitude. "They won't sleep," the nurse whispered. "They never sleep. I've tried everything." "Rock them at the same time," Nadia said quietly. "Both together. They were in the womb together. They calm when they feel each other." The nurse blinked. Then tried it. 30 minutes later, it was almost quiet. Nadia slipped out before anyone could ask who she was. 3 floors up, Siwon stood over a security monitor. He had watched the whole thing on camera without planning to. His thumb was still on the rewind button. He watched Nadia walk back to the nurse. Watched the way she moved. No performance, no fuss. Just someone solving a problem because it needed solving. He watched the boys settle. He pressed rewind again. Minjun appeared in the doorway. "Sir, the new housekeeper." "I know who she is," Siwon said. His eyes didn't leave the screen. "Leave her alone. Don't dock her wages for being up past hours." Minjun raised an eyebrow but wrote it down. Siwon didn't explain. He just kept watching. On day 7, the daycare called Nadia during her lunch break. Her stomach dropped before the woman even finished speaking. Emergency closure. Plumbing failure. Effective immediately. Nadia sat very still in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, doing the math in her head. Her sister was in Busan. Her neighbor worked nights. There was no one. There was only Amara. Her 2-year-old daughter, who was currently sitting in a daycare that was closing in 2 hours. Nadia stood up, squared her shoulders, and went to find Mr. O. Mr. O said no. Firmly, clearly, without apology. This is not a childcare facility, Ms. Osei. This is a private residence. Mr. John does not. One day, Nadia said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. I will keep her with me every second. She won't go anywhere. I just need today. The answer is. Please. That word cost her something. She didn't beg easily. Mr. O could see it. He looked at her for a long moment, pressed his lips together, and said, one day. And if she makes any noise near the master's wing, you are both gone. Nadia exhaled. Thank you. She picked up Amara from the daycare and brought her back in a carrier strapped to her chest. A round-faced, bright-eyed 2-year-old in a yellow dress who looked at the mansion gates like she'd just arrived at a theme park. Big house, Mama, Amara whispered. Yes, baby. Big house. You have to be quiet, okay? Amara pressed a small finger to her own lips. Very seriously. For 3 hours, it worked perfectly. Amara sat on a folded blanket in the supply room and sorted sponges while Nadia cleaned 2 floors. She hummed to herself. She rearranged the sponges by color. She fell slightly in love with a mop. Then Nadia turned around and Amara was gone. The panic was immediate and total. Nadia moved fast, down the hall, past the kitchen, whispering her daughter's name with the controlled terror of a mother who cannot afford to cause a scene but is absolutely terrified. She turned a corner and stopped. Amara had found the nursery. The door was cracked open. The afternoon light fell in soft gold. And Amara, small, fearless, completely unaware that she was standing at the edge of a months-long catastrophe, had toddled straight in and sat down in the middle of the floor between 2 cribs. Jaemin was standing in his crib, gripping the rails, staring down at her. Jaeyoon had gone completely still. Nadia froze in the doorway, terrified to breathe. Amara looked up at Jaemin. Hi, she said. Jaemin stared at her. Then so slowly it was almost unbelievable he sat down. Amara reached through the crib rails and put her small hand over his. She said something in the private language of toddlers completely made up, total nonsense, and Jaemin looked at his brother. Then Jaemin laughed. Not a small sound. A Rayol laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep in the belly, surprised out of him like it had been waiting a long time to escape. Jaeyoon immediately burst into the same laugh, reaching through his own rails toward Amara. Amara, delighted by her new audience, kept talking. Pure babble. Brilliant, perfect babble. All 3 of them laughing. Nadia stood in the doorway with her hand over her mouth, trying not to cry. She didn't know about the security camera in the corner. She didn't know that 40 feet away, in a darkened office, a man in a perfectly pressed suit had just stopped breathing. Siwon leaned forward, elbows on the desk, watching the monitor. He watched his sons laugh. His sons who hadn't slept, hadn't eaten well, hadn't stopped screaming since the night they were born, were laughing at a 2-year-old in a yellow dress who was showing them a sock. He sat back slowly. He watched it for 22 minutes. Then he called Minjun. The housekeeper's daughter, he said. She stays. Nobody talked about the change out loud. They were all too afraid to jinx it. But the mansion felt different. The twins slept through the night for the first time on a Thursday. The night nurse came to breakfast looking like someone had just handed her a lottery ticket. The kitchen staff spoke above a whisper. Mr. O walked without his shoulders up around his ears. Amara came every day now. Siwon had quietly arranged it. Her daycare fees paid, a car sent, no explanation given. Nadia found out through Minjun and stood very still in the hallway for a moment before she went back to work. She didn't say thank you. Not yet. Siwon watched from doorways. It became a habit he didn't examine too closely. He would finish a call, put down his phone, and find himself standing just outside the nursery, listening to 3 children make noise that should have been irritating and somehow was the only sound in this house that didn't feel empty. One afternoon he watched Nadia change both boys at the same time. Amara handing her wipes like a tiny assistant, and the efficiency of it, the warmth of it, hit him somewhere he hadn't expected. Minjun found him staring. Sir. The council call is in 10 minutes. I know. Siwon didn't move immediately. Does she know I watch? Minjun paused. The housekeeper? Probably. She doesn't miss much. Siwon nodded slowly and walked away. He left things. A stuffed bear appeared outside the nursery door. Nobody claimed responsibility. A soft blanket, cream-colored cashmere. Nicer than anything a child needed, but exactly the kind of thing a man who didn't know how to say sorry might leave. Amara adopted the bear immediately and named it Bao. She carried it everywhere. Nadia picked up the blanket, looked at it, looked down the hallway in the direction of the east wing, and said nothing. But the next morning when she passed Saiwan in the corridor, the first time they'd been that close, she met his eyes. He looked away first. The breaking point came on a Wednesday. Nadia was putting Jaeyoon down for a nap when she heard footsteps stop outside the nursery door. She looked up and saw Saiwan's silhouette through the frosted glass panel. Just standing there. She'd seen it too many times now. She put Jaeyoon down gently, walked to the door, and opened it. Saiwan stepped back. He looked, for just a moment, like a man caught doing something he couldn't explain. Nadia looked at him calmly. "You don't have to watch from the door, sir. They're your sons." The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Something moved through Saiwan's face. Grief, she realized. Raw and old and barely contained. He didn't answer her. He walked past her into the nursery. Nadia stepped aside. She watched him crouch between the two cribs, one large hand resting on Jaemin's back, the other on Jaeyoon's. Both boys stirred, looked up at him, and didn't cry. Jaeyoon grabbed his father's finger. Saiwan stared at that small hand wrapped around his finger like he had never seen anything so enormous in his life. Nadia slipped out quietly and closed the door behind her. She stood in the hallway, back against the wall, and breathed. The council met in a boardroom that had no windows. 8 men around a black table, expensive suits, dangerous eyes. Saiwan sat at the head, the same way he always did, still, controlled, impossible to read. Elder Park opened first. "The Shin family has agreed to the alliance. Their daughter is ready. The wedding could be arranged within the year." "I didn't agree to a wedding," Saiwan said. "You agreed to the alliance. The alliance doesn't require marriage. Find another structure." Elder Park leaned forward. "With respect, sir, the other families are watching. You have been less visible, less engaged. The boys are a weakness if you appear too attached. You need a political marriage to signal stability." Saiwan's eyes moved slowly to Elder Park's face. "Are you calling my sons a weakness?" The room dropped 10 degrees. Elder Park sat back. "I'm calling grief a liability. And I'm asking you to protect what your father built." Long silence. "This meeting is over," Saiwan said. He walked straight to the nursery. Nadia was there, sitting on the floor with all 3 children around her. She was singing, something low and slow in a language he didn't know. The twins were leaning against her sides like small planets with their own gravity. Amara was asleep on the rug, one hand still gripping the bear named Bao. Saiwan stopped in the doorway. This time, Nadia saw him and didn't stop singing. She just looked up briefly, acknowledged him with a small nod, and kept going. He sat down on the floor across from her. Not on a chair. On the floor. She finished the song. The room was soft and quiet. "What language is that?" he asked. His voice was different in here. Lower. Less armored. "Chui," she said. "My mother sang it to me." "What does it mean?" Nadia considered. "Roughly, you are not alone in the dark. The morning knows your name." Saiwan looked down at his sons. Jaeyoon had crawled into his lap without permission, the way toddlers do, completely assuming they are welcome everywhere. "My wife used to say the boys would change me," he said. Almost to himself. Nadia waited. "I thought she meant eventually." His jaw worked. "I didn't think she meant she wouldn't be there to see it." It was the most words he had spoken about Yuna to anyone in 18 months. Nadia didn't fill the silence with noise. She just let it exist. That was the thing about her, he was starting to understand. She didn't try to fix things. She just stayed. The threat came 3 days later. Nadia was restocking a supply closet on the 2nd floor when she found it. A voice memo accidentally left playing on a phone that had been dropped behind a shelf. She almost walked past it. Then she heard her name. The woman. The housekeeper. "She's getting close to him. If we move through her, through the child." She grabbed the phone. Male voice. One she didn't recognize. And then a second voice, one she did, one of the junior security staff who checked her ID every morning. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached Minjun's office. She put the phone on his desk without a word. Minjun listened to 40 seconds of it and picked up his own phone. "I need to see Mr. John," he said quietly. "Right now." Saiwon listened to the recording twice. Then he set the phone down very carefully on his desk, the way a man sets down something breakable when what he actually wants to do is throw it through a wall. "Who is it?" he asked. "Jean Su. Gate security, east entrance. Hired 8 months ago." Minjun's voice was flat. "He has connections to the Beck Syndicate." The Beck Syndicate. Of course. They had been probing for a soft spot for 2 years. They had finally found one. "And Nadia? Amara?" Saiwon asked. His voice was very controlled. Too controlled. "Safe. I've doubled her hallway rotation. She doesn't know yet. She stays in the mansion until this is resolved. Full security detail." He paused. "Tell her gently." Minjun's eyebrow moved slightly. In 3 years, he had never heard Saiwon say the word gently. "Yes, sir." Telling Nadia gently did not go as planned. She sat in Mr. O's office, hands in her lap, and listened to Minjun explain in careful, professional language that there had been a security concern and that for her safety and Amara's safety. "Someone is targeting my daughter," she said. "Not a question. We believe the intent is to use you to get to him." She looked up. Her eyes were very clear. "Because I'm close to his children." Minjun said nothing, which was its own answer. Nadia was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I need to see Mr. John." He was waiting in the hallway. Like he'd known she would come. They stood 3 feet apart. The first time without a child between them, without a task at hand, without a reason to look somewhere else. "You should have told me sooner," she said. "I didn't want to frighten you." Frightening me was always possible. Not telling me was a choice. Her voice was firm but not angry. "I have a daughter, Mr. John. I need to make decisions with real information." Saiwon looked at her. Really looked. "You're right. I'm sorry." She blinked. She had not expected that word from him. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. And the way he said it, careful, braced, she understood he wasn't asking for administrative reasons. "Do you want me to?" she asked back. Long silence. "No," he said. "I don't." Something quiet passed between them. Not words. Just the acknowledgement of something that had been growing in the spaces between all their small moments. "Then I'll stay," she said. "But you tell me everything from now on." He nodded once. "Everything." That night, Saiwon called Elder Park. "The Shin marriage," he said. "It's not happening." "Sir, the alliance. Find another way to structure it. I'm not getting married for politics." "The council will." "The council serves me," Saiwon said. "Not the other way around. We're done with this conversation." He hung up. For the first time in a long time, the choice had felt easy. The call came at 11:14 p.m. Amara was not in her room. Nadia was already running before Minjun finished the sentence. Down the hallway, past the nursery where the twins slept, toward the east corridor where security cameras had gone dark in a 12-minute window. Saiwon was already in the corridor when she got there. He grabbed her arm before she could run past him. Not to stop her, to go first. "Stay behind me," he said. "That is my child." "I know." His grip was firm. His eyes were already scanning. "Stay behind me." She read something in his face that made her listen. This was not the careful, composed man she'd seen in hallways. This was something older, something dangerous, something that had been sleeping under the expensive suit for 18 months. She fell into step behind him. Jean Su hadn't gone far. That was his mistake. He'd taken Amara to the East Service garage, a holding position, waiting for transport. He had a phone. He was making a call when Saiwon's men cut the signal. Saiwon went in first. There were 3 men. One had Amara, who was, Nadia almost collapsed with relief, awake and confused but completely unharmed, clutching the bear-named bow to her chest with both hands. When she saw Nadia through the open door, she said, "Mama." Just that one word. Nadia made a sound she hadn't made since the night she went into labor, a sound from the deepest, most animal part of a mother. Cywin moved. The efficiency of it was frightening. Not loud, not theatrical. He was simply faster and more certain than anyone in the room expected, and within 90 seconds, Jean-Sue and his men were on the ground and Amara was in Nadia's arms. Nadia dropped to her knees on the concrete floor, holding her daughter, face buried in her neck, shaking. Amara patted her mother's head calmly. "Okay, Mama," she said. Bao came. Later, when the security team had cleared the garage and Minjun was making calls and the night was full of controlled chaos, Cywin crouched down in front of Nadia. She was still on the floor, Amara asleep against her shoulder now. He didn't try to make her stand. He just looked at her. "I'm going to end this," he said quietly. "The Beck Syndicate. The threat. All of it." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means I'm going to war with people who thought they could use a child to move me." His voice was very level. "And it means I'm burning the Alliance deal. Elder Park and the Shin family. I'm done with all of it." "That's a lot to lose," Nadia said. "Yes." He met her eyes. "And I'm still doing it." She looked at him for a long time. "Why?" He glanced at Amara sleeping on her shoulder. Then at the direction of the nursery, where his sons were sleeping. "Because some things cost too much," he said. "And some things cost exactly the right amount." 3 weeks later, the mansion was different again. Not quieter, actually louder in a good way. 3 children and a new daily routine had rearranged the architecture of the household. Breakfast was chaotic. The nursery floor was always a disaster. Mr. O had given up confiscating crayons from non-nursery rooms and was now simply carrying touch-up paint. The Beck Syndicate had been dealt with. Cywin had moved with the kind of swift, cold precision that reminded everyone in the underworld exactly who they were dealing with. No drawn-out war. A surgical, decisive response that sent a message no one would need repeated. The council had objected to the broken Shin alliance. 3 of them had resigned. Cywin had accepted their resignations without argument and appointed younger, sharper people who understood that the world was changing. Elder Park had tried one last time. He'd walked into Cywin's office unannounced and found him on the floor of the adjoining room, helping Jaeyoon build a block tower while Jaemin destroyed it methodically. Elder Park had stared. Cywin had looked up. "You can make an appointment, Park. But I'm busy until 3. The old man had left and not come back. On a Sunday morning, Nadia found a letter under the door of her staff suite. No signature. Just Cywin's handwriting, which she'd come to recognize angular, precise, the handwriting of a man who chose every word carefully. "I have never been good at saying things directly. My wife used to say I communicated in furniture, that when I cared about someone I rearranged the world around them instead of telling them. I gave Amara a bear. I arranged a car. I paid a daycare. I burned an alliance. I don't know if that counts as saying something, but I wanted you to know I meant all of it." Nadia read it twice. Then she folded it very carefully and put it in her pocket. She found him in the garden that afternoon, a rare appearance in daylight outside his office. He was watching all 3 children from a bench. Amara was attempting to teach Jaemin to wave. Jaeyoon was eating grass. Normal Sunday things. Nadia sat down beside him. Not close enough to touch. Just near. "I got your letter," she said. "I know. You're right that you're bad at saying things directly. I know that too." She looked at the children. "I'm not easy either, you know. I'm stubborn. I'm proud. I don't ask for help. I work too hard and I worry too much and I will always put Amara first." "I would expect nothing less," he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the children, but the line of his jaw had softened in a way she'd only seen once before. The night he sat on the nursery floor and held his sons. "I don't know how to be soft," he said quietly. "I was built not to be. This whole house was built not to be." He paused. "But I want to learn. If there's time. There's time," she said. He turned and looked at her. She looked back. Across the garden, Amara successfully made Jaemin wave. He waved at a bird. Amara cheered like he'd solved a very important problem. Jaeyoon, still eating grass, applauded. Siwon made a sound she'd never heard from him before. He laughed. Not the polite, controlled sound people perform in meetings. A real one surprised out of him, warm, a little rusty from disuse. Nadia smiled slowly. Wide and real. Their shoulders touched. Neither of them moved away. That evening, all three children fell asleep in the nursery together, Amara between the twins, Bao the bear pressed between all three of them like a small ambassador of peace. Nadia and Siwon sat on the floor beside them, backs against the cribs, the room golden and still. No plans. No next moves. No war or council or alliance. Just this. Siwon looked at his sons sleeping, really looked, the way he hadn't let himself since the night he lost Yuna. And this time it didn't feel like grief alone. It felt like grief and something else living in the same chest at the same time. He reached out slowly and adjusted the blanket, the cashmere one, cream-colored, over all three children. His hand brushed Nadia's in the process. He didn't move it. She didn't either. Outside, Seoul moved through the night the way cities do, loud and lit and indifferent. But inside this room, in this mansion that had learned slowly, painfully, beautifully how to breathe again, everything was exactly and completely still. No words needed. We've come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.